Welcome everybody once again to my Blitz and Classical chess stream here on Twitch and lichess. International Master William Paschall. We are streaming from Budapest, Hungary. It's Tuesday, the 20th of September. And we've got three challengers. M477OC from Germany. Royal Python, Saddest Troll. Saddest Troll challenged me to chess 960. Royal Python not. And yesterday I thought that RP was challenging me to chess 960. Took him out of order and it turns out he wasn't. So anyway, today it's Blitz as well, and Saddest Troll, Turistaya also challenging me. I'm going to take Saddest Troll first because I haven't played today, and the slow nature of the chess 960 kind of helps me to sort of break in today sort of gently. For some reason, I never really get a quickly open game in chess 960. The game is always strategic, generally kind of more closed positions. So maybe that's just because we don't have established opening theory as much in chess 960. Maybe if we had the time to study the openings deeply in chess 960, I'd and Troll would also be willing to, play more sharp positions. Like, for example, I could play d5 here and really get a very, very sharp game. But, I mean, it looks a little dubious to open the game and then recapture with a rook, allowing something like bishop c4 with tempo. It's kind of like a Scandinavian with a rook on d5. Interesting, but I don't think really correct. So, but anyway, if you could bring the queen out with queen takes d5 white, we can't play something like d5 takes, rook takes, bishop c4, rook back to d8. And we might get a hit on the bishop on c4 with knight d6 later, so it's kind of interesting. Let's try it. I'm constantly complaining about not getting open games in the chess 960 positions, and here there's a couple things that made me decide to try this in my favor. This bishop hit on c4. First of all, f7's protected by the knight on h8. It's hard to believe that a knight on h8 could do something constructive, but it is. And secondly, if he does go with this pawn takes, rook takes, bishop c4 type variation, I think that later on I'm going to get a tempo, maybe with knight to d6 or knight to b6, as the situation allows. So it's interesting, and let's try to see if we can start playing in chess 960 in a way that might allow us to get a more open game. You could consider something like knight to b6, but I don't think it's a good idea here. We have to take with a rook. c4 also a possibility, and maybe superior to bishop c4. I think you'd be obliged to play d4 next, and it looks like white has a little advantage there. That's probably the best. Yep. I'm going to regret this, bringing my rook out early. I have a very, very bad feeling about this. So welcome, guys. Gladys Troll, Royal Python. Immediately I try something experimental and I feel like it's going to backfire in my face. But it's kind of complicated. C4 is not that easy. He plays c4, his queen is attacking the hanging pawn on h7, but I can counter with rook h5, defending h7, attacking the pawn on h2. So have the feeling it's not that good for me. The variation in question would be like c4, rook h5, h3, when white can follow up with g4 or knight to g3. Although I may be forced to play this because queen takes h7 is just going to win a rook. So there is rook e5 check. This is a sane alternative. Perhaps we're not going to open the game anymore in chess 960. Forgot that queen on b1 initially when I went into this, but rook h5 with a concrete threat of hitting the pawn on h2. And I mean, honestly, neither h3 or any other move there looks all that brutal. Rook e5 probably doesn't help me. So I think this is basically forced. But as I said, he's going to gain time on my rook. I think, here. So this is dubious for black. Yeah. This is dubious for black. Rook e5 check doesn't, you know, help my position. I could play rook e5 check and knight g6. But in the end, I think I'm just going to get hit by d4 in that position on the following move. And ultimately, I'll lose another tempo. So on h5, I might get hit as well. And there's the question of defending my pawn here. So we have a real problem. I mean, g6 defends the h7 pawn, but it leaves my knight on h8 with a huge issue as to how to get into the game. So it looks like I'm basically forced to play knight g6 now. And we have a very, very, yes, troll, this is weird, a very dubious position on my rook. He's made a couple pawn weaknesses, but I think c4 is constructive. He can play d4. And my position is not really promising. And knight g3, one of the options there, he might consider d4, just taking away the e5 square from my rook. In this position, at least I can play rook e5 check now. And there is a possibility of knight f4 in some lines, although we have to calculate, again, my rook may be trapped on g8. It's not about just hanging the pawn on h7. My rook might get trapped. Anyway, welcome, guys. Good morning, Saronche, and good morning, everybody. We're starting with chess 960, but it was illogical of me to play like this because, first of all, I took the chess 960 game because it's usually a slower game, and then I turned around and tried to play something crazy with d5. But it's kind of tilt, you know, poker terminology here, or pinball, however you like. Tilt is like you're like banging the machine, and because you're angry or you're desperate or you're just kind of like in a mood to do something crazy. Yeah, this was really insane. So I have to live with it now, and maybe c5 should be considered here. Knight f4 loses to queen takes h7. Would have a check on... No check even. So we've got serious issues with a rook. We've got to keep h7 protected. c5 comes to mind to meet d4 with pawn takes pawn. But again, knight d3 is another problem. So it's looking very, very problematic for black here. My rook can retreat to e6. This is the only semi-decent square I have, and it looks very bad. So black may never be able to really resolve the position of the rook. Giving up the exchange or something totally desperate. Maybe I can consider putting my rook on g5. In fact, maybe I made a mistake already. When he played knight g3, should we have played rook to g5 instead of rook to e5 automatically? Because rook to g5 proves a little bit difficult to hit. You know, the f4 is not possible, the h4 is not possible. And there's no bishop on c1 that would typically attack the rook on g5. So, I mean, hindsight is always, as they say, 20/20, but it would have been better probably to put my rook on g5, although I could get hit by knight e4. I mean, there's no easy solution here. c5 doesn't look good, but may still be playable because of rook g5. Getting kind of desperate. Free tacos when he hits 1,000. Almost 900 followers. Not ATM, but overall. Yeah, it's morning. Alright, guys, we got serious issues here. I mean, e6, develop that bishop. What am I going to do about my rook getting trapped? Bishop e4 check. And maybe not looking good. How do I get my other pieces in the game? Something like c6, crawl around on my back rank. c5, knight d3, rook g5, knight e4, maybe b6, controlling the center, and then d4, rook g5, b6, d4, rook g5. That looks pretty horrifying. I'm never ever going to do this again, I promise. How could I even give up an exchange? Could I sacrifice the rook for something? The bishop on e2. Have 0 compensation. c5, knight to d3, rook g5, knight e4, losing material. e6 also looks bad. Rook e6. Rook e6 is a ridiculous move. c6 maybe. Burying my bishop at a8. b6. I have to make a decision here. Yeah, this is a total disaster. And black probably like 2 pawns down materially here. Or positionally, whatever you want to call it. Difficult to find a move. e6. Knight d3, nowhere to go. b6. Maybe the lesser of the evils. Controlling c5. You can also play b3 or something like that, hitting my rook with the bishop on a long diagonal, but I don't think that's as dangerous per se. So we're going to go back here to e6. That's the plan. Now rook g5 is possible as well, actually, because f4 not possible, knight e4 not possible. Interesting, more provocative. Safer to play rook e6, but there's no way to develop my pieces there. So rook g5, surprisingly difficult for white to find a really good move after rook g5. This is not recommended. Do not try this at home. We have 1 minute and we're very precarious situation here. So, not recommended to develop your rook in front of your pawns, generally. But we're learning from our mistakes. Knight f4 was suggested in the previous position, or where? Instead of b6, maybe? Yeah, the problem was the knight f4, there was queen takes h7. And I'm like losing a whole rook on g8. So you better be prepared to sack everything if you play like knight f4. I didn't see any concrete thing to do there. I think he meant earlier, you know, maybe rook f4. The knight f4 suggestion was perhaps meant for the move before I played b6. So now b3. Okay, b3 doesn't really threaten anything. It just opens the diagonal for the bishop on a1. So maybe black can develop here. Ultimately, it seems like my rook is highly likely to get trapped. He's got 3 minutes to my 1. So this is why we play closed positions in chess 960. Try to be adventurous. You get your rook stuck on the 5th rank or 4th rank. My 4th rank. When the knight was on e5. The knight was on e5. You mean the rook was on e5. And I could have played knight f4, but it would have hung h7. And the e2 is protected by the knight on g3. So any kind of knight f4 thing wouldn't really have threatened anything. And dropped the h7 pawn, losing the rook on g8. Exciting warm-up game here. Challenges from M47, Royal Python, Turastaya, and Nash Equilibrium. Guys, if you want to challenge me, you can do so. Anybody can challenge. It's some time control between 5 minutes with 3 seconds increment and 8 minutes with 3 seconds increment. Tomorrow I'm going to be doing an unusual openings blitz classical stream, so-called Wacky Wednesday, as we did last week. So tune in tomorrow and bring your weirdest openings. I really want to keep it somewhat serious, not crazy stuff. I'm going to be playing interesting gambits, stuff like the Budapest, for example, the Latvian King's Gambit, any kind of interesting gambits, unusual openings, but within the realm of sanity. Okay, now, h4, wow, h4 Not sure what that's about. Okay, we're going to take. We've got attack on g2. And he's blocked his queen, so there's no threat immediately at h7. I'm not sure what the point is here. I mean, I wouldn't put my rook on g5 if h4 was easily playable. I could have opted for the ugly rook e6 instead. But Troll, I think, just miscalculated. Doesn't seem to be any concrete answer for white. g2 is attacked. He can't play f-pawn forward without hanging a piece, which he did. Cooperating and resigns. Wow, that was a weird game. Okay, let's just pretend that never happened. M47 Royal Python. We're going to play normal chess now. And if you don't know what's going on, it's understandable after that game. Both sides, my opening and his errors there at the end. Alright, M47 with C4. I'm playing mainly like C5 and B6. Let's try something different. Going back to an older repertoire of mine. Knight C3, Knight C6. As I mentioned yesterday, guys, the older you get, the less flexible we seem to be, and I've been noticing this with myself. So I don't want to be like dogmatic in playing the same lines again and again. I want to try to keep myself playing different stuff to a certain degree. You need to play the same opening over and over again to an extent to really learn it, but I don't want to be playing the same system all my life. So I'm going to be trying something I used to play. This reverse Grand Prix attack is an interesting defensive system. So a long time ago, I did a video series on chesslecture.com about this as a kind of repertoire against the English. This is going back like 5 years ago, probably. First, I got this idea to play the setup because I played International Master Michael Brooks in a tournament game with White where he played it against me. And I realized over the board that it's not that easy for White to play against the Grand Prix, even with the extra tempo. There's some things about having an extra tempo that actually can change the type of variation, and a lot of interesting possibilities arise because White has an extra tempo here. So because he has an extra tempo, I can play this very strange gambit now, which is my favorite variation in this line, d5. Brooks played this against me, and I was like totally, this is going back to like the mid-90s. When Brooks played it against me, I was like totally shocked, you know, when Black played d5. And I sat there for literally like 30 minutes and used a quarter of my time. I think we were playing like 40 in 2 hours. I must have spent at least 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes on White's move. And M47 just played it like instantly. Pawn takes pawn. I mean, there's two major moves there, at least for White, which are CD and knight takes. And it's not easy to decide, in my mind, like which one is superior. So F47 just kind of instantly played a decision. Okay, it's a game. You've got 7 minutes, and you've got to make a decision. So they're very different, though. Knight takes d5. I think I played knight takes d5 against Michael. And I managed to draw with White. Not like managed, actually. I was never really in trouble, but I felt like I was in trouble because I didn't know the theory of this pawn sacrifice, and had to kind of work it out all over the board. Knight takes maybe is a little bit safer for White. And that's, I think, why ultimately I analyzed a lot of lines and decided to play knight takes d5. You can tell you haven't done a tactic in your life. That's nice. Alright, guys. Let's try to be considerate of the other players in the stream, and polite. Knight to b4. Now, basically, the plan is to seal it up and put a piece on d3 and get long-term kind of compensation. But here I might not need to do that. I may just recapture on d5 and play a kind of closed position. It's somewhat similar to some lines where black plays f5 in the English in other lines. So, talking about tactics, learning tactics, and openings. Openings are overrated, in my opinion, for players. I would agree with that. Openings are overrated for players below master, but I think you need to have a kind of general opening repertoire. You can't just have no concept in the openings, but you don't need to know that much theory. Just having general systems to play would be a good starting point. Okay, so knight h3 looks like a sensible move. But I can play knight d3 check and then recapture the pawn, so I get kind of the best of both worlds. Prevent white from castling and be able to get this pawn back, not be down anything. White could consider either king e2 or king f1. Knight d3 check. Not so interested in the bishop on c1. Although sometimes that can be a very vital piece for white defensively in the French type of structure. So there are situations when I might decide to trade my knight for that bishop, but not right off the bat anyway. Alternatively, there was nothing wrong with just taking on d5, but I think this is obviously more critical. We take away his right to castle, create some disorganization in white's position. If king e2, there is the danger of bishop g4 in some variations, so have to calculate that. Now, is something like f4 possible? Maybe, but I'm going to have to watch this knight on d3. For example, f4 might win. Pawn takes f4. For example, g takes f4. Bishop g4 check. And if f3, knight takes c1 check. And then pawn takes f3. And then bishop takes h3. If f4, knight takes f4, same thing. f4, e takes f4, bishop g4 check. All these lines, it looks like I'm going to win some material there. Queen a4 check doesn't do anything. Kind of hard for white to find a move after f4. Bishop takes e4 is bad. Knight takes e4. Knight takes c1. What could happen is that he could get a lot of pawns for a piece, something like that. Could get a lot of pawns for the piece, sacrifice a piece somehow after f4. He has one pawn for the piece at the moment. Maybe I'm crazy. So f4, knight takes f4. This doesn't work. f4, knight takes f4. I'm calculating all this for nothing. He just takes with the knight, and I'm just out of my mind. Okay. All right, never mind then. That's ridiculous. Okay, I just have to take the pawn. I mean, you could play maybe bishop d6, but I don't see any reason not to take this pawn. So, Totally forgot he's just taking with a knight on f4. And then something like bishop g4 doesn't really do anything. Okay. Yeah, it felt a little too good to be true, to be playing f4. Such a position. My e4 pawn is kind of fragile. So black has a bit of space, and the king is popped out on e2. Welcome everybody to my chess stream. I'm streaming from Budapest, Hungary. We're streaming Monday to Friday from 10 to 12:30 Central European Summertime. Sunday I'm also trying to do simuls, which are usually 6 p.m. Same time zone, obviously. What's up, guys? If you have any kind of chess questions or just, want to talk about a chess tournament that's going on, any kind of chess news, any chess related stuff, feel free to bring it up in the chat in Twitch. We like to supplement the games with chess talk, basically. Queen takes d5. Queen takes d3. Luckily, it's like check when I take on d3 there. Knight f4. Knight takes f4, I guess. And the white king is real bad here. I don't want to say he's lost, because I don't think he's necessarily lost. I see potential for white to hang on in this position for sure. He also has a fairly solid center. In the event of an endgame, I think that his chances would be decent. So mostly I should be thinking about probably keeping the queens on the board in this position. Queen b5 or c4 check looks interesting to force his king back to e1. I was thinking about b6, but f3 seems like a good answer for white. Giving his king f2, and that's why I'm thinking about checking here. I don't really want him to play f3, although he still can play f3. Bishop e6, developing a piece. I really should think about developing my king, castling kingside, most likely. But first of all, I want to restrict him. So maybe bishop e6, stopping queen b3, and developing a piece. Looks like a reasonable plan. With this limited time, there's almost no way I can play perfect moves. You lost in 7 moves versus GM's chess stat yesterday because I mixed up my Sveshnikov moves. Yeah, I don't recommend playing the Sveshnikov at a under, I don't know, 1800 level, because the Sveshnikov is such a complex tactical kind of opening. I remember I told the story before about when I was a beginner. I was maybe 1300. One of the first books I got was Adorian's book on the Sveshnikov, published around, I don't know, 1986 or 85. It was like encyclopedic kind of coverage of the opening. If you don't know Adorian, he's like kind of a maniac, and he just, he's crazy about chess, but he's extremely how to say, like, obsessive, and he studies these openings like in a really complex, deep way, and it was inconceivable for me as like a 1300 to study the Sveshnikov book. There were like variations with decimal system for categorizing the variations, and it was crazy. And so I eventually decided I just wasn't ready for something like the Sveshnikov. So instead I played the Scheveningen. I think I started to play the Scheveningen, which was a lot more positional and not as sharp, and not requiring quite as much memorization of variations. Bishop e4 check. White is hanging on here. Rook g1. Rook g1 is sensible. It's a good positional move. Of course, he can't castle, but anyway, he couldn't castle. He can play bishop f1. This is the kind of position that I could see myself playing with white. Bishop b4 check's overrated. It feels active, but I think this move doesn't do anything, but just simply help white to develop their pieces. So in this kind of situation, I think it's better just to retreat with queen d7. I don't want to help him develop his pieces. What does bishop b4 check do? Just simply bishop d2, forcing white to make a good move. Why do I want to force white to make useful moves? Think about that when you play. It's a lot of people want to play the move like bishop b4 because they want to be like macho and play an aggressive move, but objectively, I don't want my king on the queen side either, because I think in this kind of structure, white's designed to play more on the queen side. Now, immediately with threats, bishop c3, threatening d5. I play bishop e7 to stop h4. I'm hoping that in some situations in the endgame, maybe that pawn could prove to be a weakness for white. And then this is interesting now. m4-7 with queen c2, thinking about castling queenside perhaps. a5 is interesting. I don't know if this is the right move or not, but I mean, it makes some sense. If he tries to castle queenside, we have the pawn advance. If b3, we can play a4, maybe try to break it up. So I'm just kind of activating my rook and trying to discourage him from castling queenside, which means leaving his king in the center, hopefully. But assessing this position is like a tiny bit better for black, would be my evaluation. Now a4. So I think rather than winning by direct attack, we're thinking about playing this position for like a tiny endgame advantage. Now pawn takes pawn. Don't want to fix his position by playing bishop takes c4. They want to fix his pawn structure, bring another pawn toward the center. Hoping that in the endgame maybe he has some pawn weaknesses. This pawn or this pawn. Not that easy to attack. And now white obviously wants to try to do d5 somehow. Can play c6. Anyway, I have some issues with my c pawn along the c line here. White lost on time. Slightly difficult position for white, though I think defensible. Probably slight advantage to black here, but not lost by any means. Looks like the A file, though, is getting to be a bit of a problem. Can't castle. Camel culture. You didn't forget. Thanks, Will, for explaining. Need to study my Rogozenko book, then. Yeah, I mean, the Sveshnikov is just really one of the most, I think, complex Sicilians. And I was just totally terrified by the Dorian book. I mean, that book was particularly inaccessible for anybody under at least 2000, in my opinion. Of course, other players like Rogozenko, since then, there's been a lot of books on the Sveshnikov, I mean, that are like digestible, more digestible. So, but Dorian definitely not qualified to teach anyone under 2000. The guy is just, you know, a chess trainer for like master minimum. Okay, Royal Python 7-5. Let's start this game. So anyway, I think m4-7 did a good job for the first time, probably facing that gambit. Knight takes d5, a little like more calm. I ended up playing that against Michael Brooks because I saw, you know, that in these lines where you take with the pawn, many variations you're going to have to not be able to castle, as was the case there. Alright, so Royal Python, I'm going to play e4, as I have been doing lately. Camel Culture. I made up this nickname for Camel Culture. I thought it was funny. Maybe it's getting old now, but it looks like Jeroen took me up on it. What's up, Camel? A6, bishop A4. Another tough Lopez with Royal Python. I almost thought about playing something different on move 1. Almost played the English. One thing I want to do is to be able to play many different openings on a decent level. So I don't want to be able for... I don't want my opponents to be able to kind of nail me down to being able to expect me to play e4, d4, c4. It's an advantage to be able to play 3 or 4 different openings, obviously, but I have 30 years of tournament experience. It's not easy to just pick up and start playing 4 different systems with white. And now lately been working on e4, as I mentioned yesterday. So, but that variation I played last game is a playable repertoire. e3 is not really a great move, I think, because of that gambit. White needs to play... Ambulances are coming again. I never heard so many ambulances as I hear here in Budapest. Queen c7. So we're into the main line of the Chigorin variation, which is having something of a renaissance lately. It's interesting because knight a5, I don't know, 15 years ago when I was playing, you know, a lot of tournaments, it seemed like you'd never see knight a5. It was sort of out of fashion completely. And in the last 5, 7, 8 years, it seems like all the top players have brought knight a5 back. You know, it was considered to be old-fashioned and not as interesting as the more modern Breyer and Zaitsev variations. But and because Karpov used those lines in the World Championship matches with Kasparov, Karpov never played knight a5. Now knight a5 is becoming like a main line again. So queen c7, knight to d2. Guys, if you want to challenge me, you can challenge me to anything between 5-3 and 8-3. So bishop d7, one of, I guess, many moves in this position for black. But I think bishop d7 is one of the main lines. Knight c6, also possible. C takes d is also played. But it's really necessary to develop the bishop at some point to either d7 or b7. Maybe rook d8. Because Kiris, I think, played a gambit trying to play rook d8, knight f1. I believe that's it. Here, instead of bishop d7, rook d8, knight f1, and d5. And if I'm not mistaken, maybe he played cd first. So rook d8, knight f1, cd, cd, d5 is the so-called like Kiris counterattack or gambit, I don't know. And white's supposed to not take a pawn, but instead just play like knight takes e5 and d takes e4, knight g or bishop f4 with piece play. That'd be an interesting line to try black. I don't know if it's still considered good or not for black. Let's get back to the actual game. Bishop d7, obviously not as aggressive as rook d8. Hungary, I saw for the first time there's chessboards in the pools. Yeah, this is famous. Here, I'm very close. I live very close to the Széchenyi Fürdő, which is the thermal bath in the city park. And well, I mean, it's also you can see the old guys, usually old guys, of course, playing chess. in the city park. There's a lot of postcards with that kind of thing here in Budapest. There are even stories that like Fischer played at the Széchenyi Fürdő, maybe even a photo. I don't know though. I haven't seen any. Okay, rook on a to c8. The other rook is possible to c8 as well. This looks kind of mainliney. And in fact, I might have had a game with someone in this. Maybe even you, Royal Python. I don't remember all my stream games, obviously. Knight e3. I think this is mainline, and I have had at least one other game here. Knight e3 is a bit more efficient, you know, not moving the bishop again, although you can play bishop d3 as well. Probably not too many other moves there. I would imagine you could play like bishop b1, but it looks like it interferes with the rook on a1. Na zdrowie. Knight on the rim is pretty classic variation. I mean, thousands and thousands of games with the Chigorin variation. The knight on the rim has some potential to get back in the game. It's an unfortunately neglected piece, but you have to make some concessions with black. I mean, it's not easy to equalize by force. Knight to c6 looks like a normal kind of move. Black is threatening maybe to play knight b4. I don't like to release the tension in the center. Exchanging would open his bishop, and playing d5 closes the position, which generally favors the defender, I would imagine. My theoretical knowledge here is not that plentiful. a3 looks like a move, stopping knight b4. I'm kind of running out of time, so I don't really want to think about this too long. a3 may not be the best move, but I don't really have time to sit here and think about every candidate move with 2.5 minutes left. Possible that Royal Python knows more than me in this Lopez. My knowledge isn't that deep, but I do have a good general kind of fundamental understanding. Looks like a normal position. White is a tiny bit better. The pawn duo in the center. Black a bit passively plays to the bishop on d7, bishop on e7. But as we said, that's your black. I mean, your black playing a classical opening, you're going to be a little bit passive if white plays correctly. It's still not easy for me to do anything here. I can't really launch a kingside attack with the tension in the center. And it's actually difficult for me to develop now. Maybe I'll have to play like b4 or b3 and bishop b2. That would be most logical. If I had to move now, I guess b3, not as weakening as b4. And he played a5. Making b3 even more appetizing, I think, because I'm going to try to stop him from kind of fancy stuff here. Gotta watch the long diagonal. We could end up, you know, getting hit by bishop f6 or something like that, skewering a queen to a rook on a1, but it's not easy for him to organize that. But it is important to have these kind of concepts in your mind, you know. If there wasn't a knight on f6, I'd be in trouble here. If there were no knight on e3, no knight on f6, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, knight takes, pawn takes. Besides the fact that I'm dropping my bishop on c2, I could be vulnerable to bishop f6. So Sometimes it's easier to just kind of see patterns rather than having to calculate concrete variations. It takes a long time to calculate concrete variations. But if you just kind of see the potential for there to be an accident on this diagonal, you can just kind of keep your eye open rather than calculating everything. With the knight on e3, I mean, obviously my bishop on c1 doesn't have much potential, so we're going to play bishop b2. If you guys choose to challenge me and you play, it's up to you whether you want to listen to the stream. Some people like to tune it out while they're playing against me, and I can understand that, because it's hard to formulate your own ideas when someone else is like talking. I had this problem sometimes watching other players play, like watching friends play and then making a suggestion, and all you do is like mess them up. I mean, in general, if you're like watching your buddy play chess online or something, and normally it's better just to shut up and not say anything, because you're thinking in a different way, and if you try to help them, normally it's like the too many cooks spoil the soup kind of saying. Interesting tactics here. Knight takes e4. Knight d5 would be a powerful response. And so maybe Royal Python's looking for some kind of tactic. No, he goes for the simplification. This is a logical line. I did look at this. Should I play bishop b2, take on d4, and have a slight advantage, or maybe take on c3, play bishop b2, similar variation? Obviously, I can't avoid the exchange of queens. Maybe we're just winning a pawn here. Queen takes queen, bishop d2, followed by bishop takes a5. Yeah, I think he, and myself as well, overlooked this. You're thinking mostly about bishop coming to b2 now, and a5 turns out to be major weakness. I don't see any tactics for black. Looks like he's gonna just drop this important pawn on a5. It was a natural simplifying maneuver, and I honestly didn't see bishop d2 either. So I guess a5 was just too much, or you have to find another move instead of trading queens. But generally speaking, black doesn't want to take on d4 and end up with a weak pawn on d6. So he has to kind of keep the tension. Keep the tension with some sort of solid move, like rook e8 maybe. Perhaps in the long run, maybe a5 was too ambitious. I don't know. Thanks for the link to my YouTube channel, guys. Video chess training on YouTube. I'm trying to upload these streams there, as well as original material videos that I produce. Maybe black has a little bit of compensation here. Hopefully not enough. And now he's threatening to win a piece. You just simply move the bishop. I guess arguably the safest move here. Famous last words, but bishop d3. I'll play f3 if I have to. Slightly weaken my king side probably doesn't make that much difference in this endgame. I wouldn't want to do it with the queens on in the middle game, weaken my king side. But in this endgame with the queens off, it probably doesn't make a huge difference. Maybe black getting a little bit of counterplay. If I have to play f3, I have to play f3. So Mutton Dagger says, a documentary watched about top players and average players' pattern recognition. Average player would spend time analyzing a position. A top player would have some kind of subconscious recognition that allows them to generally play the correct move. Interesting stuff indeed. Yeah, this kind of, maybe you said it, what I was talking about, like this concept of like bishop f6 and winning with a tactic along the diagonal. whereas like a beginner might have to just calculate, like trudge along, calculating every line. The stronger player can just make shortcuts and save time to calculate other stuff and think about other stuff. I think that's the point. Interesting, I never mentioned on the stream, years ago, I had a chess player I knew from Cambridge, Massachusetts, Harvard psychology professor Chris Chabris. He's like a 2300 player. He actually was doing experiments and studies about chess players. So one time, I'm not sure if I was the only subject, he probably had others, but he had me go in and get an MRI, and they did like MRIs of my brain to try to study like how, you know, my brain behaves when they're showing me chess problems. I saw one GM recently was undergoing the same kind of psychological or medical, you know, experiment. But interesting indeed. Bishop c6, this queen. It's sort of like a reaction to my first game, if you guys saw it. Rook on the fourth. It's like a queen entering the game a little too early. Almost trapped on c5. Bishop b4, or bishop b4, rook e5, bishop c3. Nearly trapped. First game, I was playing rook out to d5 on the second move in chess 960. So that's what I'm making reference to here. I may be missing something more obvious. Ooh, feel like I just made a mistake. If worse comes to worse, I'll play bishop takes f6. Oh my god. This was a terrible mistake. Was it? It looks like it was a terrible blunder by me. Found this rook e6 thing. Oh my goodness. Maybe we have an answer. Knight to f5. And e4 is not very well protected, but hopefully we have some kind of compensation for losing that pawn. Bishop takes e4, knight takes e7 should win a piece. So he more or less had to do this. Knight takes e4, and I can take on e7 and play f3, which seems to win the exchange. At the very least. Yeah, that's what I figured. Up a clear exchange. Royal Python does not want to give up here. He's kind of cagey, actually. Didn't really want to capture on c4, to be honest. Cagey defense. d5 with the passer. Nice. Activating all my pieces. And then I had a trick here. I don't know if it's enough, but hopefully. You got to combine attack and defense. Yeah, this is winning. Thank heavens for the back rank weakness. Python with the cagey defense. Not enough. Not enough here. Well, you're welcome to have one of those. Maybe rook c4 was more accurate. Don't think he's going to be able to stop it. King is a little bit slow. He's not giving up. Alright. Yeah, we're close. Wow, look at all those challenges, guys. I'm never going to get to all those games, but probably close. You could probably play most of them. Turistaya, Nash Equilibrium, Borkan. All the challenges are good time controls. 8-3. You can play faster if you want. 5 minutes with a 3 to 5 second increment. You guys don't have to play 8 minutes if you want to play faster. So, Turistaya, let's mix it up a little bit. I don't play every single game E4. I want to throw in some other stuff. So, the English, one of my favorite openings. I've been playing since the time when I quit the Sveshnikov. Equally long. I'm playing the English since I was about, well, my first rating when I was 1275, probably. I picked up an old book on the English in the mid-80s, well, 86 when I played, 87, my first tournaments. An old book in English by Nigel Pova. That was probably my first opening book. Alright, knight c6, g3, d4 is also a line. Turistaya moving quickly. I like to play d4 a little early here. Not to give black the option of playing the King's Indian with d6. If you guys do play this English opening, symmetrical English opening, if you play d4 earlier rather than later, you don't give black the option to play a King's Indian with d6. Something to keep in mind. He's been playing English when the pyramids were being built, exactly. It seems like that, isn't it? But it's weird, you know. We all look at the world that we live in and think about, you know, how it seems to us now. But so many chess players have come and gone in my lifetime. It's so strange that that I'm getting older and these players don't even exist anymore, who were like formative kind of people. A lot of players, like younger players now, don't even know the existence of a lot of players who were like gods to me when I was starting out. It's kind of strange. So a6, I had a little bit of experience with this move. There's a Colombian IM, Alejandro Rios, who played this against me many years ago. And I actually lost the game. I played pretty correctly, but ended up losing the game, sadly anyway. I think c5 is critical. Oftentimes the position may be reached. I think with Rios it was castle a6. But it probably doesn't make a big difference if you castle or not in this position. c5 is a very kind of weird looking move that oftentimes would be overextending. Where did I go wrong last game? Exchanging in the center or just missing bishop d2? Yeah, I don't ask me, Royal Python. I'm not really an expert on the opening. I mean, a5 looked kind of provocative, I think. It seems like there's more solid moves you could make. a5 is a very ambitious move. I would doubt that is best. It looks like you're asking a bit much there. Maybe some kind of solid developing move instead. I realize that a5 is a normal plan at some stage. Maybe it was too early in this one. So, if I can recall correctly, black may have a way to equalize here, but Not that easy to find it. Now against me, Rios ended up allowing knight b3 and getting a worse game, allowing me to keep the pieces on the board. Maybe Turistaya is onto something by trading pieces. Maybe that's a better approach. I'm not sure. But I just remembered that Rios game I played in like Philadelphia International, maybe 1992. I was around 2300, and I just remember it being a very long game where I was clearly better out of the open. I was very upset that I lost because the guy had just done this a6, which was patently like bad and sort of swindled me somehow. I just remember being very, very disappointed. Bishop Fianchetto seems to be the most popular of English. Any reason for that? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the most aggressive. You're putting the bishop... I mean, Fianchetto is the optimal position for the bishop in all openings, but it complements c4. Now, when you play c4, you're fighting for control of d5. It's completely logical that this is the consequence. You know, the best is the bishop on b2 to kind of create coordinated control of d5. So everything works toward a common goal. 98 now from Turistaya. So Turistaya, another option would have been to play d6. And the idea, and interestingly enough, would be to play d6, pawn takes pawn, 98. That I think it's possible I've seen somewhere already, that position. And maybe your move order also works. But I would imagine it's less forcing. Now your queen is unprotected on d8. So there could be some complications. d6 instead with the idea of pawn takes pawn 98. Maybe slightly better. But who knows? Maybe that this is still okay for black. Have to move the queen. That's easy to see. And where to go? Like typically you would go to d2 or d3 in this type of variation. But I'm thinking here maybe I have to be a little bit more aggressive because the knight moved away from the king's side, and also my queen can put pressure on e7. Not an unheard of maneuver in this line, but in the main line it's not considered dangerous to play queen h4. The main line being black didn't play a6, he trades on d4 straight away, and then plays d6. If I could trade this pawn for this pawn, I'd have a great position with a clearly better pawn structure and some weaknesses for black. You hate my neighbor mowing his grass, so I have to turn up the volume. Saronche, you should move to where my family lives in Massachusetts in the summer, in July and August, man. You never saw so many people like mowing their grass. They're obsessed with mowing their grass. It drives me crazy too. I completely feel for you. I understand you have to mow your grass like once a week or something, but I mean, every day? Do we have to really mow the grass every day? There are people who actually do that. Like, they have nothing to do, and they're obsessed with their lawn. It's kind of, I always thought it was kind of an American thing, but maybe it's like international. Strange. Okay, so now d6. Knight d5, bishop g5, bishop h6, rook d1. We have a lot of candidate moves here. He is threatening to take the pawn on c5. Bishop g5, provoking weaknesses in black's position, is interesting. Bishop h6. But knight d5 looks more aggressive. It's just directly threatening e7. With the other idea of knight b6. A plush lawn is worth it. Oh wow, Serenity was a greenkeeper at a golf course. It didn't tell me about mowing the grass every day. I don't know, man. I think it's just part of American culture. You have to mow your grass every day. The worst is the people who have like a small yard and they have a ride-a-mower, you know, just because like they're old and they have nothing to do with their time, and they just want to be like cool, like riding this like ride-a-mower around the lawn. That's the worst. You know, the ordinary like gas-powered lawnmowers aren't that annoying, but you know, the mini ride-a-mowers, they get pretty loud. We're getting a little off subject here. Now knight back to f6. Okay, so knight b6, picking up the bishop pair with tempo looks good. Don't see anything better. Buying some time, and we've got two bishops. Pretty open position, actually. And maybe we have some finesse moves we can play. Not necessarily just grabbing this bishop, but some sort of in-between move that can put some pressure on black. Black has a couple of candidate moves in this position. You have traumas about grass. I can understand, man. Okay, so rook b8, what I'm talking about by finesse moves is basically something like bishop f4. But I'm wondering if I'm getting too fancy here. Say I play bishop f4 and black plays like bishop e6. Now my knight is sort of stuck on b6. Maybe it's too fancy. I guess it's best to just take the guy on c8. Take on d6. Do we have anything really tactical like pawn takes pawn, queen takes b6, pawn takes pawn, rook e8? I don't see what I can do there. Interesting lines though. Basically bishop e6 feels like sort of positional threat to me. So I'm going to take... We are up a pawn, right? Not up a pawn. We're just up position. We're up position. I like when people say that. Actually, b7's hanging if he takes with a rook. That's pretty important. Maybe he has to think about taking with the queen, not to hang b7. Sort of a side effect. I wasn't really planning on taking b7. It's like, oh, yeah, that might be important too. Crusader of Hope, best lawnmowers are the small solar-powered ones that move on their own. What about like a Roomba lawnmower? They must have those by now. Lawnmower robot. Why not, man? That's got to be the best. The drone lawnmower. That's awesome. Lawnmower drones. Knight takes c8. Guys, tomorrow I'm going to be doing unusual openings. Quote-unquote wacky Wednesday. Gambits and other unusual openings not normally in my repertoire. We're going to play tomorrow. I encourage you guys to share in the festivities. Bishop takes b7, snap a second pawn. The problem is rook takes c5 and maybe rook h5, kind of attacking my queen. Maybe not a major threat, but I should think about it at least. Pawn takes, queen takes, d6. Getting a little bit low on time. Snapping this pawn. Black has a little bit of compensation here. He goes rook b8. I guess I was expecting rook c2. We have bishop f4, e5, and nothing there, so black with rook b4. Gulp. I have to be careful about my queen a little bit. Probably not that dangerous. Black with a tiny bit of compensation. Somewhat active pieces. Queen g5, or queen h3. Maybe queen h3. Not as active as queen g5, is it? For me, it's like tossing a coin. I mean, really, queen g5 or queen h3, I don't know. I could also play e4. Black has half a pawn compensation for the sacrificed pawn, more or less, I would say. Feels like he's got something. It shouldn't quite be enough. That's my intuition here. We are kind of tied down to b2. Though with a powerful bishop pair, I might be able to give up that pawn and still be better. Do anything to win this pawn on a6, basically. Knight e4. Obviously a drawback of queen g5. Threatening my queen, but nothing else especially. I could play queen a5, queen f4, queen e3, queen e3. Feels like I'm a little bit restricted, tied down. May have been better just to chop the knight on e4. I'm down to 26 seconds. Turistaya playing very actively today. Queen a3 maybe. Fortunately, I can't develop my pieces. In retrospect, I guess queen h3 I like better. I wanted to stay active. f5 is best move. Then I guess queen a3. Is queen a3 best, though? Rook b1 also possible. Now black has more than half pawn compensation. Black has like full compensation for the sacrificed pawn. He's very active. White has to be careful not to be worse, probably. But one slip by black and he's also, with the king on g8 somewhat exposed. Black has to be a bit careful as well. Bishop f4. Does it do anything? Bishop f4. I don't know. We're down to 5 seconds, so I have to make blitz moves. Even if I have to sack the exchange, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Knight c3 is definitely a move. I'm going to eliminate that guy. He was not a friend of mine. Could have played knight c... Oh, I lost on time. Wow. Thinking too long. Okay, man. Congratulations. Totally forgot about the time. 3 seconds, not enough. Good game. Alright. So Turistaya scores a point. Haven't played in a while. I don't remember the last time we played. Ages ago. So it takes me out. Looks like I'm winning there. The last move, though, you should have played knight c3, I thought. The other day, who was it, jinxed me, said I never lose on time. I think Royal Python says I never lose on time, but occasionally I just freeze. It has happened before. I just kind of freeze because I'm not used to losing on time. But bishop takes e4, f takes e4. I'm just b3. I'm better. Couldn't bring myself to actually click the move. But why not instead knight c3 here? I didn't really understand. I mean, this This is possibly forcing me to play rook a1 with a repetition of position, nearly trapping my queen. But actually, another possibility existed I didn't see for some reason. Queen d3. This move totally, I totally overlooked. The black has good compensation. Good game, man. Let's move on. Nash equilibrium. So it was a good game, but we got a little bit negligent with the time there. Black, though, giving me a lot of trouble. Bishop takes the knight fork was a possibility. Nash equilibrium. Alright, I'm going to play e4, e5 a little bit. So we do occasionally freeze. That happened to me in Zalakaros in the one game I lost to a weaker player in June. In a very critical ending where I was a pawn down and nearly lost. I was probably drawing with perfect play, but I just froze. Literally froze with 5-second increment. Or no, 30-second increment or something. How much was the increment? I can't remember. I just froze, you know, in a position that probably wasn't lost. And then I, after I saw my flag was down, I hammered the clock and it registered a move in the score, in the game score. But actually, that wasn't played because I had already lost on time. So if you look up the game that I lost to this guy Sabo, I technically lost before making my last move. It was the losing move. Ironically, it was a losing move. I had to find only moves to not lose. So I lost on time in a drawn position, but it was really, really extremely difficult to find the perfect defense. Turistaya surprising me there, defending very actively in what should have been a lost position. Bishop takes c6 now, the delayed exchange variation. Not really dangerous, I would think, for black, but playable. Some sort of delayed exchange variation with knight to c3. I don't know too much theory here at all. Just general plans. I do recall a game between Rubinstein and Janowski. I think it was Rubinstein-Janowski, and that actually came about through a normal exchange variation, but the position was almost identical to this. And Janowski was an active player. He played something like bishop g4, and then I think Rubinstein played like queen e2, knight d1, d3, knight e3, like a reversed 4 knights, and won a beautiful game. I think it was Rubinstein. It could have been Capablanca, though. Knight to c3. A lot of great chess played in history, but I prefer knight d7. I don't really like to play bishop g4. If I'm going to end up like exchanging that piece off or something, white's going to have the better game. So Nash Equilibrium likes to play bullet on the stream. We had a bullet game with him earlier, a few days ago. I would recommend using your time, though. There's a little more to be learned from that. So now bishop f4, which puts pressure on c7, obviously. Play knight c5 here. Optically better for white. I don't think that black is in any grave danger. Just checking out the comments there. If you guys have any interesting comments or chess questions, feel free to comment on in the chat here. White playing 12 moves in 24 seconds so far. Don't really understand why you need to play so fast. Bishop g4, again, developing this guy. Seems like I don't want to trade off my bishop pair in this type of position. Maybe sacrifice this pawn at c7 somehow so I'm not tied down to it. Or trade it for another pawn. Bishop f6. Certainly viable. Bishop g4. h3, bishop h5. g4, bishop g6. Kind of like that line. I could take on f3, but I think white remains a little bit better there if I take on f3. So king h1. And then I was thinking maybe bishop f6. Bishop f6. Bishop takes c7, bishop takes c3, pawn takes c3, knight takes e4. When I guess black's equal. Another possibility is knight e6 now, defending the c7 pawn. Maybe that was my original plan, and we're going to stick with that. I wanted to get the bishop outside the pawn chain before I played knight e6. Defending c7. And then play this. Don't understand what Nash tries to prove by playing 1-minute chess and 8-minute time control, but it seems to be his agenda. Bishop f6. I'm not sure that he's ever participated in the chat here, or we know much about him. Welcome everybody, and thank you for those of you who do participate, you know, more than just playing. Let us know who you are, what your level is. Feel free to chat, comment. E5 now. I kind of induced white to do this on purpose because his bishop is really bad now on g3. So, not unusual kind of theme. Black is probably better. It's very like a Berlin ending. And looks like white is just overextended. Bishop f5. Or just simply oppose the open file. Because you have your choice here. Hard to say which rook to put on d8, but I kind of wanted my rook to be able to come across. So. White's structure looks pretty grotesque here. The rook takes. Yeah. So, a really, really bad position. Nearly lost. Rook d1. And there are lots of good moves now. Knight d4, knight d2, and white is hanging on by his fingernails. I have interesting possibilities. Knight d4, knight d2 only move. That looks really bad for white, but how do I finish him off there? Bishop f5. Bishop f5, rook d2. Bishop b4. Bishop f5, simply this. The truth is there's probably like multiple solutions to this puzzle. But it's an illustration of basically what we'd basically see in a Berlin defense. And we have a winning position with the 4-on-2 majority on the queen side and the bishop pair. There's no way that white should ever survive in this kind of position. So I want to mobilize my pawns. Pawn majority. Maybe get my other bishop active. Cutting off his king. We have 10 challenges, guys. We've got another hour, a little over an hour to stream, so I'm never going to be able to play everybody. Bishop e4. Bishop takes e4. Dropping another pawn. Opposite color bishops are nice. This is not opposite color bishops. So it's lost for white here. Knight c5 now, knight d5, knight takes e4. Just bishop takes c3. It's just another pawn for the collection. It's 2 pawns up. With f5, I create basically like a force field. That is, king is stopped by my knights and pawns. Actually looks like a good defensive try. h6, not sure about that move. I want to stay there. All right, let's get these queenside pawns moving. Simply a5 and c5 and b4. And then a route for my king. King is more important than the pawns in any ending. Doesn't have bishop d8. And undoubled my pawns. I think you could do better if you used your time. I really do. Threatening king c4. And I have check. Yeah, doesn't look really good. Just go over here and eat the rest of the pawns, I guess. B2 check's good too. So, I don't know about the time use there. Borcon, 1500 provisional. Had to refresh, get the ads over again. Everyone wants to play today. I don't know why. Tomorrow is the interesting day where we're going to be playing unusual openings. Borcon, okay, e4. This has been my main opening system with white over the last few weeks. A little bit longer than that, in fact. Switching over to e4. Borcon has not played me before. Yeah, people don't like to resign. And yesterday we saw why. I was up a whole piece against I think it was Panic, and I just hung my piece and then hung my queen the very next moves. There's a chance something funny will happen. The Steinitz defense, very solid, a little bit passive for black. And now a6 is a bad move. Someone recently did this against me. After d4, you have to play either bishop d7 or e takes d or some other move to reinforce your position. I don't know if you can play knight e7 in this position or not. No, that just loses a pawn. So, yeah, really just bishop d7 or pawn takes pawn. There's no other option there as far as I know. So somebody else did this a few weeks ago. It's just not good for black. You're losing a pawn. No compensation. If you take on e5, you have a bad structure. You can play a6 first. If you want to play a6, play it first, and then play d6, bishop a4, d6, which is totally okay. That's the Steinitz deferred. Yeah, this is identical to that other game I had. It's a kind of gambit, but a6, I've seen this sort of gambit with a different order of moves. Maybe in the Philidor. People will play the Philidor, and when you play like d4, they play bishop g4 or something, just sack a pawn. Kind of like that. I don't really like exchanging and sort of helping black get developed. White could certainly get the pawn back in some line and just have a tremendously better pawn structure. That's a big option for white, not to try to be greedy, but just give the material back to have a better structure. I could play h3, bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, pawn takes e5, and have basically clear advantage in terms of pawn structure. So it's really up to you how you want to play. I feel like I should hang on to the extra pawn more or less a little bit here. But h3 is tempting and simple. I mean, giving the pawn back leaves white with a huge structural advantage. So I don't mind giving back a pawn. To play a position where black really has no counterplay and is behind in development as well. So it's up to you. Matter of style, if you want to try to hang on to the material or convert it into a different sort of advantage, as I'm trying to do here. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, rook d1. We can play a kind of position where he has a terrible bishop, maybe really bad bishop. Not terrible, just really bad. Although queen b8 is a move. We're aiming for good knight versus bad bishop. So, though queen b8, queen c3, hitting c6, and preparing knight a3, knight c4 looks good enough. Queen e7 is also reasonable. If knight a3, I'm going to play this anyway. Threatening to win a pawn. I'm actually not sure what black should do there. Queen e6, I thought maybe castle, sacrifice the pawn and play queen b4 with attack on b2 and queen e4, although I guess I can just play b3 and be up a pawn in that line. So maybe it was necessary for him to do that. Knight a3, also knight d2. Got another player here who focusing mainly on moving fast, it seems like. White's positional advantage is beyond doubt. b3. Securing the b pawn, securing the knight on c4, and it's a position where I have no risk at all. I can just play for play for a win with no risk. Rook b5. I have knight a5, but I think it might be better just to increase my positional advantage. Rook d3. We can win these pawns anytime, but it's better to finish my development here. There may have been better ways to play for white, but as I said, this is really risk-free. You can try to keep the extra pawn, though. Black has a little bit of compensation. Now, bishop e7, he wants to activate his bishop. Don't think it does a whole lot, though, so I'm just gonna let him do his thing here. Queen a1 might be better than queen b2, avoiding tactics like queen takes c4, and also giving me the c1 square. Also connecting my queen with the rook on d1. This is not an automatic retreat. A lot of people would put the queen on the more forward square, but it's much better to go back here. Now, looks like we could play rook f3. He's trying to set up some kind of pressure. Although he could have played an interesting move there. Queen g6. a4 would force rook c5. That's very awkward for black, isn't it? Now he either drops the pawn on e5 or has to play rook c5. No, rook c5 like loses. His pieces are too tangled up. So this looks like it's probably winning. Winning at least a clear central pawn. And probably the game. Rook is pretty awkward. Doesn't Sarwan live in Amsterdam? I don't know. I think he did. I guess he lives in the Netherlands, but who knows? c3. Do I really want to play c3? This is ridiculous. Yeah, I want to play it. c3. Now black has to sack the exchange, but he doesn't really have enough compensation. Just like a clear exchange down. I didn't know where he lived. I just knew he lived in the Netherlands. Yasser Serwan. But this one's a rook. Or a piece. If you decline, the rook is trapped. Saburkan, I think you can play, but you just need to take more time. People addicted, like it's smoking crack or something, to playing 1 minute chess. Just you know, get off the drugs, man. The 1 minute drugs. You need to take your time. It seems to me that you can play good chess if you take your time. You were in that game even with the dubious opening. You're sort of hanging in there. Too fast. Geese 8-3. Geese is a player who can play fast but takes his time too. Yasser Sarawan is online. I like Yasser. He's a good guy. He's a good ambassador for chess, I think. E4. Oh, C5. You're always playing the... he's always playing knight A3 against C5. I'm getting kind of sick of that. So I'm going to play E5. Don't remember what our last game where I played E5 was. Against Geese. Okay, the Scotch. Scotch is a good alternative to the Roy Lopez, and I guess we did have a game. I played G6 against him. Recently for chesslecture.com I did a video of a game where Nigel Short lost in the Olympiad. I don't think it's been published yet, against Seth Rahman with Queen F6. Queen F6 is a decent move. I mean, it has a lot of similarities with like Bishop C5, but it seems like, you know, Short was just trying to get an active game rather than play the standard lines. I've been playing mostly G6. I never played E5 against you. Okay. It was somebody else then. I thought I did. I played Caro Khan. Yeah, Queen H4, Plucro. I know that's a variation, but I don't really believe in it. G6 is as dubious as I'm willing to play. It seems like against Queen H4, White should be able to take the initiative. It's a very, very risky move. I know that it's a variation. It may be playable for Black, but it kind of goes against my principles. Developing the queen early, hunting material, I don't really advocate it. And I don't know the theory at all, to be honest. And I've seen some lines. Queen H4, Knight B5 is probably one of the main lines, where oftentimes Black might have to play like King D8 in some lines. But I think philosophically I don't really like Queen H4. It looks cool to throw the queen out there, but it's not really a principled move. G6 is risky too. It's a bit more principled. I'm sure that White can probably get a slight edge against G6, but it's a move that most players aren't really prepared for. So, Geese exchange on C6, which I like for Black because it brings my pawn toward the center and gives us a good chance to fight for control of the center. And I guess what I like about G6, it has a lot of, since I play the accelerated dragon for Black in the Sicilian, it has a lot of similarities. I'm used to playing fianchetto type defenses, so for me G6 is a kind of natural setup. Queen to F3, okay. Early ideas of pressure on C4. Got lateral protection of the knight on C3. Black oftentimes has to decide whether to go knight E7 or knight F6 in this kind of line. I'm guessing that he might have E5 if I play knight F6. And I could see something like knight F6, E5, knight D5, knight takes D5, pawn takes D5, castles. Black has compensation. No, I can't do that because I'm hanging my rook on A8. So we let him take on D5, and then rook B8. Bishop C4 castles. Black has some compensation for the sacrificed pawn there. So I wouldn't dismiss E5, knight F6 allowing E5. Also Queen E7 could be played by black. But e5, knight f6, queen e7, bishop f4, maybe just bishop f4, castles queenside with a very sharp game. He also has bishop g5, but I don't think that's that dangerous. Knight e7, on the other hand, is kind of passive for black. I'm going to try this. D5. Well, I don't think I can play D5 right away. I mean, one of the advantages, he's controlling D5. So I'm going to just play knight F6. Don't really fear this pin because of H6 and G5. E5's unclear, and I prefer developing my knight to the more active square rather than E7. E7 might be playable, but it looks kind of passive for black. If knight e7, bishop c4, castles, bishop g5, something like that looks like black could be slightly worse. Don't know if this is any kind of theory. I would imagine queen f3 would be a kind of rare move. This is already a rare variation with g6. I would think queen f3, although not a bad move, is unlikely to be like a common move in this position. Now bishop c4. But I'm confident f7 is well protected. And now I have pins along the e file, so e5 not really playable. And we can play simply d6 here. d5 seems to be prevented, but d6 looks okay for black. Other options. Rook e8 isn't really good. f7 would be weak. Play bishop b7, e5. Looks good for white. So I feel like I have to play. Looks like I have to play d6 now. And then e5 is an interesting and disruptive move. Only second thought is d6, e5 for white. Trading pawns, basically. Pawn takes e5, queen takes c6. When my structure is slightly worse, that does seem a bit problematic. Could play bishop d7. Is there anything else I can do before I go into this with d6? d5 doesn't really look right. Queen e7 maybe looks artificial. I think I just have to do this. If he doesn't do e5, he has other moves. He doesn't have to do e5. It's on him. I mean, he could decide to play this, which changes the structure or not. He could certainly make some kind of normal move here. Bishop g5, one of them. But as I said earlier, I don't really think this is a problem. It may in fact hurt white because there's a small chance his bishop gets relatively buried on g3, and it never really gets active in this game. And that's what we're going to bank on here. This bishop may not really be able to get into the game effectively. Almost can trap his queen, not quite. So, alright, Geese has played quickly too. So, we need to think about this, obviously. e5, knight g4, or knight d7, alternative. Controlling the e5 square, absolutely vital here. And he's got a 2-minute time edge. Panic, the name in Dragon was first coined by a Russian chess master, Dosuk Mirsky. Interesting. I didn't know that. AlphaSar says 97 and 95. Same thing. And 97 was probably more or less the same thing. Knight g4 a bit more active, not obstructing that guy on c8. And now 95. No questions asked. 95. We're probably going to grab the bishop pair. Or he's going to give up his bishop on g3. I don't think he really wants to do that, but he might decide to do that. It's his choice which bishop he wants to give up here. I'm not absolutely obliged to take the bishop on c4. He took the dark square bishop. Interesting. I'm not obliged to take that bishop on c4 necessarily. So it's kind of King's Indian-ish type of position now. To me, at least. That's what it feels like. I'm playing my King's Indian. And I think that's a good game. I have a good game. The dark square bishop is a jolly joker. White isn't like lost by any stretch of the imagination, but I 100% prefer black here. Queen f6, rook b8, queen f6, maybe rook b8. Rook b8 could have problems. In some lines, queen e3 will hit my a pawn, will like avoid an exchange of queens. You could play queen f6, and then if he moves the queen, rook b8. I don't think I can force a trade of queens under any circumstances. Black is slightly better because of the dark squared bishop, but white remains with a pretty durable position. Good white squared bishop. Alright, let's play queen f6. I'd like a trade of queens, but he's probably, not going to go out of his way to trade queens. We do have a threat, though. We have the threat of queen takes f3 and bishop takes h3. We also have ideas here. My king is somewhat open. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm concretely kind of looking for a queen exchange. It's going to be hard for me to attack him without my king coming under attack, but maybe not. Maybe I have serious attacking chances. A la Alexei Shirov. g4 is actually pretty good looking for black here. I will trade queens. I will trade queens on my terms. Let me throw this in first and trade queens. King g7. Black is better. And the two bishops should be, if not winning, really unpleasant, really difficult for white to hold this slightly worse position. Notice that the pawn on c6, it's just doing like the majority of the work. I mean, controlling d5, how huge is that square, to be able to control d5 here? Now g4 is interesting. I'm not really sure what it does ultimately, though. It may just worsen my pawn structure. So we're going to play a constructive move, king g7, getting out of the pin and giving us the option of course, the natural f5. Black would love white to play g4, I would think. So, kind of close to clear advantage. Something between slight and clear advantage for black. A computer might be able to hold this, but for a human it's kind of hard. White is definitely worse. Has to be very accurate not to collapse here. Hisit Nuns, what? Did somebody say something? Anybody have a question? The bishop pair is stronger with the queen on the board. I think it's strong in any case. I don't think it's necessarily related to the queen on the board or not. It's possible that some strong player has said that, and maybe they have some kind of idea behind that. But to me personally, I've won a lot of games with the bishop pair, irrespective of the queens on the board or not. I think it's usually an endgame kind of grinding tool more than anything else. If you guys had any question that I missed in the chat, feel free to just shoot it out again, because I do often get kind of bogged down in the game, and you may have asked something about an opening or some chess question. If I didn't get to it, feel free to spam it one more time. So I want to thank everybody for joining me here. Tomorrow is Wacky Wednesday. We're going to be playing unusual openings. What does the world's top engine suggest for the first move? I think that every engine seems to prefer e4, because computers see the number of squares that are controlled. The queen and the bishop are opened up much more with e4. It doesn't necessarily make it a better move, though. I think that's open to interpretation. All right, now we have a couple ways to approach this position. I imagine I could try a kind of pawn storm. f4, closing up the king side and trying to play h5, g4. This kind of position, you would, yeah, probably I would like to have the queen on f6. You know, it would be better to have the queens on the board. Now, having decided to play f4, but I'm not sure I made the right move there. Another option was like bishop takes c3 and isolating his pawn on e4. Bishop takes c3, but it seems to incorrect to simplify. We are pretty restricted on the clock, but he's doing a good job holding on. Maybe I had d5 there, winning an exchange. Yeah, it looks like I had d5 last move. Wow, we just for an instant take a look at that. Instead of, oh man, I need to go back. I'm going to lose on time. So I could have played d5. No, what am I talking about? Never mind. That doesn't make sense. All right, I'm going to lose on time, so let's just make the move. Oh, he's got that. Oh no, knight f6. I missed knight e6 check. Wow. Totally screwed this up. Okay. I'm going to have to try something else. Just trading and good bishop versus bad bishop type of thing. Otherwise, I lost all my advantage there. The a5. Better king, a little bit more space on the king side. Probably white is holding this. But we have playable position. I'm not sure I'm much better here, but it looks interesting. We have chances to grind white down. Maybe should have played rook d5 there. Oh, no, pawn structure, that's losing, isn't it? Okay, now Geese kind of panicked. I better be careful here. I let his king get really active. We're gonna need this break on the king side. But this isn't so great anymore. I really screwed this up. White had a golden opportunity to play rook h1 there, and I have no idea what's going on. if he gets that in. Wow. What is going on around here? This is sharp. Really, really sloppy ending. Black's still better. Lots of mistakes by both sides. Time pressure. And F3. Man, what? We both played badly in the ending. Lot of mistakes. So, anyway, good fight. We're going to play KD Patak, who I think we played yesterday for the first time. Yeah, it got a little out of control. I missed 96 and then had to give up one of my bishops when my advantage was pretty questionable at that point. We were never worse, I think. Maybe at one moment at the very end. Not sure. KD Patak, yesterday's game was a draw. It was interesting. Okay, so delayed. No, Benoni down a tempo, a la Mamedyarov. I don't remember the order of moves. Crusader of Hope, yeah, we both played rather poorly at the end there. Let's try something different. KD Patak seemed comfortable in the reverse Benoni yesterday, I want to say. So now we've got a reverse Queen's Gambit of some kind. Pawn takes pawn. Or E6 is a Tarash. So I don't think I want to do that. Knight F6 maybe. But KD Patak is a mystery account with no rated games. Just appeared yesterday. It says hello. But it held us to a draw yesterday. So it's not a beginner. You say the chess explained had a suggestion f4 d5 knight f3 bishop g4. Bishop g4 is just a common idea against pretty much everything white can do. I mean g3 b3. It's like a Tory attack type of defense. You can use it almost universally against everything. But an interesting defense against f4 would be like actually f4 d6, and if e4 d5. To play a delayed Scandinavian where f4 is a bad move. I think Richard Palliser mentioned that possibility in beating unusual chess openings. I kind of like that. The c3 Kali attack now. This is KD Patak. Mystery player is very fond of kind of reversed openings or slow, quietly deceptive type of setups. It's just like I'm playing white, but I have a tempo less. So one thing I could do would be pawn takes pawn and go into an exchange Queen's Gambit. He instantly took with the c pawn, which is very unambitious. I think it's definitely better to take with the e pawn in that type of position. But white, if he wants to play kind of defensively, I guess bishop g4 here is one possibility. But I like a6, stopping bishop b5. It's a weird kind of reversed exchange Slav. It seems like KD Patak is some kind of somebody's alternative account. Maybe they're trying to get 2 games against me or something. I don't know. But obviously not a beginner. h3 is like a very subtle move, you know, so this is some kind of experienced player who wants to play against me but doesn't want to reveal their identity. Bishop f5, getting the bishop outside the pawn chain seems like a prudent thing to do. Not forced. Another option would be g6, but I don't really like fianchettoing in the exchange type Slav positions. This is the kind of position where normally white wants a draw, and you might even see like bishop d3, bishop takes d3 with an equal position. Guys, we have time for probably 2 more games after this. Not a very exciting opening. Slav isn't a fun opening. f4, d5, g3, h5. I don't think that would be my first idea, but interesting. a3 now. Almost move my king. Notice that I'm not bothering with h6 here. And the reason for that is that I just don't think that a bishop is a very good piece in this type of position. We have the option to play bishop e4, actually. We could even let white take on f5. But my pawn structure is a little bit worse for wear if I do that. So bishop e4, an interesting kind of provocative move. And that's probably good. Bishop takes, knight takes. f3. A bit weakening for white, I would imagine. So I feel like playing a la Caruana or something like that. He likes to play Slav. I don't play Slav, but you know, I play it if I have to. I mean, if it's the best setup in a position, that's what we're gonna do. I mean, we've got a Slav type position. But white created it by playing e3, c3, and this very unambitious but solid type of setup, which is never fun to play against. But you know, maybe white overvalues the power of bishops in closed positions. Now I could castle, and if he gives up his bishop, I play f5. Bishop takes e4, pawn takes e4, knight d2, f5. Actually looks pretty good. So I don't mind letting him take on e4. My one fear was that if I played f5, he would possibly be able to play g4, guys. That's why I was a little bit reticent about like f5 right away. Maybe g4, though it should be okay for black. I didn't want to give him that extra possibility. So now I'm willing to play f5. When I think my minor pieces are better than his minor pieces because I have 2 good knights and a good bishop in a closed structure. And white has good bishop, bad bishop, and knight in a closed structure. And so it, to me, adds up to, you know, strategically better for black. And I have free position, so no problem with my pieces mobilizing. And I think I'd much rather be black here, although it's maybe not anything like crushing. If I have to choose a side, I prefer black. It looks like I have prospects on the king side, and white doesn't really have any play. h3 is a very tangible weakness, reducing the flexibility in his position. f3 is going to be a move that he normally wants to play to kick my knight out of e4, but he can't really do it without drastically weakening his king side. And I say this from a wealth of experience for being white in such positions, playing d4 for most of my life. Now he maybe plays f3, but it's very, very weakening. And his other option is to play f4. In that case, we have to deal with the position in a different way. But I think, in any case, we have a good game. King h8 is prophylactic. We have maybe use of the g file if we play g5. And also the king doesn't remain on a white square in case somehow the position opens up with the f3, e4, and my king is a little bit more likely to get hit by a check or something. So basically g5 is the main idea, but we also have a slightly safer king. Now he may play bishop b2, although it looks like we have a strong attack here. Stonewall attack, normal stonewall attack. Maybe I won't bother with moving the g-pawn. Maybe we can just use a frontal attack with the pieces. This is standard stonewall attack material. Rook h6, rook g6. Wait and see what he does. If he does f4, we're going to break him open with g5. But we don't have to play g5 unless he plays f4. Maybe we can create serious threats with just the pieces here. Rook h6, or maybe rook g6. Rook g6, rook h6, which is better? Rook h6, f3. Sack a piece. There are possibilities of sacking a piece. Also, rook c8, man. I mean, this move probably doesn't hurt. Throw in rook c8. Yeah. Get his queen to a less effective square, or there, where he's vulnerable to forks. Now f3 is off the table. Black has strong attacking potential. So we're actually playing the stonewall attack with black. I imagine we'll have time for just one more game after this. Stone without c-pawns. Bishop takes e4, which creates an interesting question. Which way to capture here? Normally you're taking back with the f-pawn. Here we have to consider taking with the d-pawn. At least consider taking with the d-pawn. With the d5 square, I mean, this knight could be rerouted to like d5, and it's a pretty serious idea. But I think that either capture was playable. It's really hard to say for sure, concretely, with 1 minute, you know, to think about it, which is definitely best. Well, I'm kind of torn between attacking on the king side and the queen side here. He has like no development, but he's getting counterplay. This is clearly not a beginner like a strong player. Using very little time, keeping me under pressure on the clock. I think black is better, but white is in the game. Now he's threatening the very annoying bishop a5. And totally all my pieces build up now for the kingside attack. I've got to keep the position open. That's why pawn takes pawn, I think, is better. Knight g5 isn't possible. Knight e5 isn't possible. White defending like a genius, though. My other rook up to g6 would be kind of utopia, but I don't think I have time for that. So things are not that easy. Be f4, rook g3. How to get a rook to g3. KD Patak says too much pressure. So he has time to commentate too. Interesting. Maybe queen d6 was my plan, right? Quite a tense game where black was slightly better, but I think now white has enough activity that he's okay. Wow, knight takes e5. Quite a resource. To be very careful. This also could be, it could be someone getting assistance. I'm not sure, but I don't think so. I mean, I had the feeling it's a human, the way it played, but I'm not 100% sure. Now knight e5, just a very strong move. I guess I should take, but then rook c8 check, rook f8, bishop b4. Looks like it's just winning. I mean, this is probably winning for white, this position. The sun aura. Rook takes. Oh, I see. Okay, nice move. It just wins by force. Yeah, alright. Alright guys, one more game. Chess Panic. It's the last game I have time for. Yeah, basically knight e5 just wins. Black got a little bit awkward there. Chess Panic, are you here? What would you suggest for black after d4, knight f6, knight f3? I'm a Benko player, familiar, with most kingside fianchetto openings as black, looking for something independent to punish the absence of c4. Chess Panic, if you're not here, I'm going to give your game to somebody else. You got 30 seconds. d4, knight f6, knight f3. I'm a Benko player, familiar with most kingside fianchetto openings. Yeah, well, obviously c5 has got to be considered. A lot of Benko type players will opt for that. But I don't think you can really punish the absence of c4. mean, I don't really think that's possible. You know, knight f3 is just too fundamental a move, really, to punish it per se. The most aggressive move I think you can play there, really you can only talk about it in terms of what's the most aggressive thing I can do. What's the most aggressive thing I can do? And it's usually c5 in most cases. You could also play the same thing. You know, you could make the same argument for like d4, d5, knight f3. What's the most aggressive move I can play there? Which would also be c5, which was kind of like Rubinstein's obsession. When he was old and got kind of crazy, in his later years, Rubinstein actually became completely obsessed with the position after d4, d5, c4, c5. And this is all he would think about, like, for the later years of his life, as crazy as that sounds. To the point where Rubinstein had actually convinced himself that, like, d4, d5, c4, c5 was the ultimate defense to the queen's gambit. But again, I think critical there, if you play the Benko, you know, you're willing to play structures where white is playing d4, d5, and so, you know, you might not mind the positions after, like, d4, knight f6, knight f3, c5, d5, which are different and independent from, like, the normal lines. So now d4, the Jinji Hashvili videotape variation, although it can lead to other things too. Really, white doesn't have, or sorry, black doesn't really have a lot of options. That's what makes this variation so popular for white. I already played c5, but after e3 or some weak move, the position is just slow. Yeah, that's, well, I have a friend who's a Benoni player, and that's life, you know. And that's really all you can do. It isn't fun, I realize, but after e3 or something, white is like surrendered all their opening advantage. In the last game, I got carried away, but I mean, I had a better position after like 10 moves. So you kind of have to live with it. White is white. White has an extra move, and it's just like if they want to play slow, they can play slow. You can't like blow them off the board or necessarily punish them. Okay, so castles, where are we here? Castles, bishop c5, knight takes e4, right? Knight takes e4 is probably the sharpest line. I don't really know the theory that well, but hey, you know. You can switch to the King's Indian. Yeah, I mean, that's what I play, is the King's Indian. But it's not a walk in the park either, and the positions are quite boring if white wants them to be boring. If you face, like, you're a King's Indian player, white plays d4, knight f6, knight f3, g6, bishop g5. It's very, very hard for black to get an active and fun game. That's all there is to it. You know, you do your best to try to get an active game. I encounter the same problem when I'm white and I play knight f3, black plays d5. And should you play g3 or should you play c4? Which is better? And it's not easy to say. But it feels to me like the c5 move is a bit more active than g6. And leads a bit more to more open, can lead to more open type positions. But if you want to play King's Indian in its more pure form, then maybe g6 is the way to go. If you play f4 100%, you play the Dutch with black. What? If you play one f4. So. And now I'm trying to remember queen h5 or queen d8. Queen a5. Queen h5 or queen a5, not queen d8. Play queen h5 or queen a5. I don't really know which is better. Not really sure which one is better. You're hoping for the max lying attack. Well, at least I avoided that. But that's also interesting. Bishop c5, I think, is equally good. This knight takes e4, bishop c5. Difficult to say which one is better. Black should equalize, at least, in both lines, I would imagine. Though it's been a long time since I studied it. Thanks for the answer, maybe b5. Okay, be careful with b5 because I think you're just giving white a better bishop g5. B5 is okay with like white or something, but we get another tempo. There's a variation, for example, d4, knight f6, knight f3, b5, or d4, knight f6, knight f3, b6. b6 isn't really good because after bishop g5, knight e4, I think bishop h4, and white is just better. It's no better after b5. b5 doesn't improve your chances. b6 isn't good. b5 isn't good either. So I don't really recommend that. Okay, rook takes e4, bishop e6. This is book. I'm certainly not a big expert with black here. There's masses of theory on this position, and I don't really know which is better, where to have the queen, because there's two variations, and the last time I checked, both were kind of debatable as to which one was better. Although here it would be different. You'd have the pin. You'd take on d1. I think castle queenside looks like the right move. I'm not really remembering how this goes. So here we go. Castling queenside. Theory unbeknownst to me. Black's supposed to be fine. That's about all I know. Maybe b5. Yeah, if b6 isn't good, I really doubt that b5 is good against that. It's a nice try, and I've played b5, knight f3, b5. I've played a6 and b5 a lot against e4, but those openings are pretty risky. Yeah, it's a good question, but there is no way to punish white. Knight f3 and d4 is just too inherently correct to be punished. White chooses to play very safely, and there's not a lot black can do. But I feel your dilemma. Also, you know, those people who play like with white, that they're playing against a stronger player and they're more or less like trying to draw, and how to combat that. You know, like the last game the guy played the Colley system against me, and it's not really easy to deal with. So last game for today, guys. Tomorrow will be Crazy Openings Day, otherwise known as Wacky Wednesday. 10 a.m. Central Eastern European Summertime, or otherwise known as Hungarian time. Well, when in doubt, play c5 if you want an active game. So we're here in this line. What do they call this again? Is this the Wilkes-Barre variation? Is that right? Does anybody know? Is this the Wilkes-Barre after the city in Pennsylvania? The other one's the Max Lang with bishop c5. I'm not a big expert in I'm not a big expert in double king pawn theory, at least as far as names go. To consult my old friend Joseph Fang. Rook takes d4, bishop e7. I could take, but it just develops his queen. Well, bishop c5 may be good. Bishop c5. b4. Probably not an issue. So I think that probably is theory. No, wait a minute. I get pinned? Bishop c5. Rook takes rook, rook takes rook, queen h5. That's the problem. Well, there I have bishop, and then bishop b6. Which should be probably critical. So we could just play a solid move. Maybe bishop c5 is asking too much. Bishop c5 allows queen h5. So we should just play bishop e7. Learning theory over the board. You got a wheelbarrow position. You tried to use some voice activated like search engine. Just say Wilkes-Barre in Dutch. See what you get. Wilkes-Barre. You like the Albinus surprise weapon. What is a wheelbarrow position? Is that something that Bozo's Chess Emporium invented? Fun stream today. I lost a game. Some interesting stuff. Tomorrow will be fun though. Bring your gambits and I'll bring mine. We'll see what we can do. Guys, check out my YouTube channel, Video Chess Training on YouTube. Be here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Central European Summer Time. Sunday I will be doing my simul. This week I had to cancel, but Sunday 6 p.m. 1800 hours. Don't get angry at me, troll, if he's here. Chess 9-6. You don't want to know. I'm unadventurous. Unadventurous. Rook takes d4, bishop takes d4. c5 cuts off my queen. Could see myself sacking a pawn at some point. This should be fine for black, but I'd feel safer if I traded queens or something. Rook takes, sacking the g7 pawn, and then queen g5 with active play. Not really sold on it. I'm kind of getting low on time. Black should be fine here. And maybe I'll sack both the a7 or g5 pawns, I would think. Rook takes d4, rook d8. We lost to Chess Panic on the blunder yesterday. Hung our queen. I don't know if this is right. I guess I could play rook g8 if I have to. It's kind of passive. Feels kind of passive. We're running out of time. Rook d8 is the active move. Bishop takes g7. Queen g5. Maybe I'm asking too much. Well, let's try it. We'll play for the initiative. We've got two bishops. Oh, he didn't want that. Didn't want that pawn. All right. All right then. White's playing quite well. 1500. Just be up on your Wilkes-Barre variation. But it all follows very logically. White's development is easy to see. You know, how the pieces come out naturally. He's 30 seconds ahead of me on the clock. We have 3 second increment. I just didn't see a way to play actively there. Looking at knight b5, but I'm not really sure White has anything concrete after a6. Knight a7 check, king b8. Knight c6 check, pawn takes pawn, bishop a7. I get 2 pieces for a rook there. He did play knight b5. It's like I suggested it. Well, it's a logical move, but I'm not sure if it's really good. It sort of trapped itself. As I said, knight c6, he has 2 pieces for a rook there, but I don't think that's really good for White. He did do it. Two bishops for the rook. It should be good for black. And bishop. You have to be careful of mates, obviously. No, he didn't take that. Thought you were going to take the pawn. I guess I had bishop c4, and he realized it in the last moment. That's interesting. This looks very, very dangerous for him. Should play bishop c4 anyway. Very, very dangerous position. White is probably losing. Has to play queen to d1 or queen e1. And I mean, black should be winning here. Queen takes b2. Anyway, thanks for the game. I don't know about the theory there. It'll be interesting to look it up. So be back tomorrow, guys. Wacky Wednesday, unusual openings. Thanks, Jeroen. Thanks everybody for being here. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.